The distress signal came in at 0300 hours, and it woke up the entire bridge of the USV Iron Wake. Captain Kang Do-hyun was already on his feet before the alarm finished its first cycle. He had been sleeping in his chair again, something his second-in-command, Yoon Hana, always told him would ruin his back before the war ever could. But there was no war yet, not officially. Just a slow, ugly feeling that had been growing across human space for months, like the air before a storm. The signal came from the civilian cargo ship called the Bright Sun. It was a small vessel, 30 crew members, carrying food supplies to the colony world of New Incheon. Simple people doing simple work. They had done nothing wrong, but the Vidari conclave did not need a reason. Do-hyun brought the Iron Wake to full speed. Hana was already at the tactical console, pulling up sensor data and running calculations with the kind of quiet focus that made her the best tactical mind he had ever served with. She did not look worried. She looked angry, and that was worse. When they arrived, the Bright Sun was drifting. Its engines were dark. A Vidari patrol fleet, 5 warships each 3 times the size of the Iron Wake, surrounded the little cargo ship like wolves around a sheep. Except Do-hyun knew something the Vidari did not. Humans were not sheep. They had never been sheep. He opened a communication channel. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Commander Rethis, a Vidari military officer with a long insectoid face and 4 black eyes that held no warmth at all. Rethis was tall, even by Vidari standards, and he wore his rank like armor. "You are in conclave space," Rethis said. His voice was flat and bored, like a man swatting a fly. Do-hyun kept his voice calm. "The navigation logs show otherwise, Commander. The Bright Sun was well within human territory. I am requesting the immediate release of the crew." Rethis tilted his head. It was a gesture that, among the Vidari, meant amusement. "Your logs mean nothing. Your borders mean nothing. You are a minor species. You exist because we allow it." Hana's jaw tightened beside him. Do-hyun could feel the heat of her anger from where he stood. But she said nothing. Not yet. Do-hyun sent a formal protest to Earth's United Systems Command. The response came quickly, and it was exactly what he expected. "Stand down. We are negotiating. Be patient." He closed the channel and looked at Hana. She pulled up a file on her console. 7 incidents in 4 months. 7 times the Vidari had stopped human ships, harassed human crews, pushed into human space. 7 times Earth had said the same thing. Be patient. Negotiate. "They are testing us," Hana said quietly. "Every time we do nothing, they push harder." Do-hyun knew she was right. But he was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders, even when the orders tasted like ash in his mouth. Far away, on the conclave homeworld, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Lyrium, a Vidari cultural observer who had spent 2 years living on Earth, stood before the High Council and begged them to listen. She was small for a Vidari, with softer features and eyes that carried something rare among her people. Genuine concern. She had walked the streets of human cities. She had eaten their food, listened to their music, read their history, and their history had given her nightmares. "You do not understand what you are provoking," she told the council. She brought up images on the central display. Battlefields from human history. Cities reduced to rubble. Soldiers fighting in snow, in mud, in burning deserts. She showed them Stalingrad, where humans had fought over single buildings for months in freezing cold. She showed them the siege of Olympus Mons during the Martian Unification War, where human colonists had held a position for 200 days against impossible odds, eating rats and melting ice for water, and still refused to surrender. "This species," Lyrian said, and her voice shook, "does not give up. They do not surrender. They do not forget. If you push them too far, they will burn everything, including themselves, before they let you win." I am begging this council to choose peace while peace is still possible. High Speaker Olin watched her from his seat at the head of the council. He was ancient, even by Vidari standards, with a body like a tower of dark chitin and eyes that had seen 1,000 worlds bend to the conclave's will. He had ruled the galaxy's most powerful alliance for 60 years. No species had ever challenged him. The idea that these small, soft, short-lived creatures from a dirty little planet could be a threat to him was not just unlikely. It was funny. "Thank you, Lyrian," he said, the way one thanks a child for a drawing. "Your dedication to your work is admirable. But you have spent too long among them. You have begun to think like them. These are scavengers. Nothing more." Lyrian opened her mouth to argue, but the council had already moved on. 3 days later, Commander Rethus made his message. He lined up 3 of the Bright Sun's crew members in front of a camera. They were ordinary people. A pilot, an engineer, a cook. They were scared and they were far from home, and they did not deserve what was about to happen. Rethus looked into the camera and said, "Let this remind the humans of their place in this galaxy." Then he killed them, on a live broadcast that reached every corner of human space within the hour. On the bridge of the Iron Wake, Do-hyun watched. The crew watched. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The only sound was the hum of the ship's engines and the soft click of Hana's fists tightening at her sides. When the broadcast ended, the silence lasted for a long time. Then Do-hyun reached for the communication console. He opened a channel to every human ship in the sector. 42 vessels. Patrol ships, frigates, cargo escorts. Every single one answered. Do-hyun spoke one sentence. His voice was steady and low, and carried the kind of weight that only comes when a man has decided something that cannot be undone. "They have made their choice." He closed the channel. Hana looked at him. There was no surprise on her face, only a cold, sharp smile that would have made Commander Rethus very afraid if he had been smart enough to see it. None of them were, and by the time they understood what they had started, it would be far, far too late. The broadcast of the 3 executions reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday evening, the streets of every major city on the planet were full. Not with protests, not with panic, with silence. Millions of people standing together, watching the screens, saying nothing. And in that silence was something far more dangerous than screaming. The United Systems Parliament was called into emergency session. Representatives from all 14 colony worlds attended by holographic link. The Speaker of Parliament, a woman who had spent 30 years arguing for diplomacy, stood at the podium and asked for a vote on military authorization. There was no debate, no long speeches, no one stood up to urge caution or patience. The vote was unanimous. Every hand raised, every voice said yes. For the first time in over 200 years, humanity declared total war. On the Iron Wake, the order came through at midnight. Bake Juno, the ship's chief engineer, read the message 3 times to make sure he was not dreaming. He was 24 years old, the youngest member of the crew, and he had joined the Navy because he loved machines, not because he wanted to fight. But the message was clear. Refit the Iron Wake from patrol configuration to full combat mode. The standard time for a combat refit was 3 days. Juno did it in 9 hours. He worked without stopping, moving through the ship like a man possessed. He rerouted power lines, reinforced hull plating, rewired the weapon systems to draw more energy than they were ever designed to handle. When Hana found him in the engine room at dawn, covered in grease and burns, she asked him how he had done it so fast. Juno looked up at her with tired eyes. "I stopped asking the ship nicely," he said. "Almost." While Juno rebuilt the ship, Shin Miso locked herself in the medical bay with every piece of Vidari biological data the Navy had ever collected. Miso was the ship's medic and biologist, a quiet woman with gentle hands and a mind sharp enough to cut steel. She had treated injuries that would have made most doctors faint. She had operated on alien species no human had ever touched before. Nothing scared her, but what she found in the data did not scare her either. It made her sad. She called a meeting of the senior crew. Do-hyun, Hana, Juno, and Cho Tae-sung, the weapons officer, gathered in the briefing room. Tae-sung was the oldest member of the crew, a former Black Ops Marine with scars on his hands and a service record that was mostly classified. He sat in the corner and watched with eyes that never seemed to blink. Miso put her findings on the screen. "I have been studying the biology of every species in the Vidari Conclave," she said. "I compared their evolutionary histories, their physical capabilities, their stress responses, and I found something important." She brought up a chart. On one side, the Vidari and their allies. On the other, humans. Most conclave species evolved on worlds that were calm, stable climates, low gravity, rich in resources. They never had to fight to survive. They never had natural predators. They developed intelligence because they had time and safety. They are, biologically, prey animals. All of them. She paused to let that sink in. Humans evolved on Earth, a planet with earthquakes, hurricanes, ice ages, droughts, floods, volcanoes, and enough predators to fill a nightmare. Our gravity is stronger than 90% of inhabited worlds, which means our bones are denser, and our muscles are more powerful than almost any species in the conclave. We are faster, stronger, and more physically durable than they are. Tae-sung leaned forward slightly. It was the most interest anyone had ever seen him show in a briefing. Miso continued. But the most important difference is here. She pointed to a section of the chart labeled stress chemistry. When a Vidari feels fear, their body produces a chemical that slows them down. It makes them freeze, hide, become still. It is a survival instinct from their evolutionary past. When there is danger, they stop. She looked at each of them. When a human feels fear, our body produces adrenaline. It increases our heart rate, sharpens our senses, blocks pain, and makes us faster and stronger than we normally are. Fear makes us more dangerous. We are the only known species in the galaxy with this response. The room was quiet. "They are taller than us," Miso said softly. "They are older than us. They have better technology. But they are prey. Every single one of them. And they just declared war on the only predator species in the galaxy." Far away, on the conclave homeworld, Lyrian was trying one last time. She had gathered new data, real numbers, not just history lessons. Human industrial output had tripled in 2 weeks. Civilian shipyards were building warships. Mining colonies had stopped mining ore and started manufacturing ammunition. Farming worlds were rationing food to free up transport ships for military supply. The entire human civilization was transforming itself into a war machine with a speed that should have been impossible. She brought this to High Speaker Olen. She showed him the numbers. She told him that humans do not fight wars the way the Conclave does, with limited engagements and negotiated truces. Humans fight total wars. They mobilize their entire population. They sacrifice everything. They have burned their own cities, rather than let an enemy take them. Olen listened politely. Then he waved a long, thin hand, and said, "You worry too much, Lyrian. They are one species with 14 worlds. We are 42 species with thousands of worlds. Send Commander Rethus with a fleet. A disciplinary strike on their nearest colony will remind them of reality." Lyrian felt something cold settle in her chest. "Which colony?" she asked. "New Incheon," Olen said casually as if ordering a meal. The order went out that day. 200 Vidari warships, the largest fleet assembled in a generation, began their jump toward New Incheon. Commander Rethus stood on the bridge of his flagship and smiled. This would be easy. This would be quick. These humans would learn their place, and the galaxy would move on. On the Iron Wake, the intelligence report arrived like a punch to the gut. 200 warships, heading for New Incheon. 6 million people on that colony, and between the Vidari fleet and those 6 million people stood exactly 40 human ships. Cho Tae-sung read the report, stood up, walked to the weapons bay, and began loading every missile, every round, every weapon the ship carried. He did not say a word. He did not need to. Do-hyun looked at the tactical display. The numbers were terrible. 5-to-1 odds against them. Any reasonable commander would call for retreat, pull back, wait for reinforcements. Hana stood beside him, studying the same display. She tilted her head, and that dangerous smile appeared again. The one that Do-hyun had learned long ago meant she had already figured out how to win. 40 ships, she said. That is more than enough. Do-hyun looked at her. He had known Yoon Hana for 8 years. He had seen her outthink admirals, outplay war simulations, and turn impossible situations into victories so clean they were used as teaching examples in the academy. If she said 40 was enough, then 40 was enough. He gave the order. The Iron Wake turned toward New Incheon. Behind it, 39 other ships followed. The prey had sent 200 hunters. The predators were sending 40, and the predators were smiling. The Vidari fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Incheon system, and Commander Rethus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 200 warships, each one bigger, better armed, and more advanced than anything the humans could build. This would not even be a battle. It would be a lesson. Then the first wave of mines detonated. Baek Juno had not slept in 2 days. While the fleet raced to New Incheon, he had taken every mining charge, every spare navigation drone, and every piece of scrap metal on 3 supply ships and turned them into autonomous explosive devices. They were ugly, crude things, held together with welding wire and desperate engineering. He had seeded them across every approach vector to the planet, thousands of them, drifting silently in the dark, like sleeping predators. They woke up when the Vidari arrived. 34 Vidari ships were destroyed or crippled before a single weapon was fired. The explosions lit up the darkness like a chain of new stars. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Rethus stared at the damage reports, with all 4 of his eyes wide open. This was not how war was supposed to work. There were rules. There were traditions. You met your enemy in formation. You exchanged fire, and the stronger fleet won. You did not scatter invisible bombs across space like a coward. But humans had never cared much for rules that someone else wrote. Rethus pushed forward. He still had the numbers. 166 ships against 40. The math was simple. The math was on his side. Yoon Hana made sure the math was wrong. She commanded the human fleet from the tactical console of the Iron Wake, and she did not fight the way the Vidari expected. She did not form lines. She did not hold positions. She used the planet's moon as a shield, hiding ships behind it and then sending them screaming out in groups of 3 and 4, striking fast, hitting hard, and vanishing before the Vidari could return fire. The Vidari had never seen anything like it. Their combat doctrine was built on order, on formation, on the steady exchange of firepower between organized fleets. Hana gave them chaos. She gave them ghosts that appeared from nowhere, tore holes in their lines, and disappeared before the smoke cleared. It was not elegant. It was not honorable. It was effective. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it was over, 12 human ships were gone, but 70 Vidari warships were burning wreckage, a kill ratio that stunned every military analyst in the galaxy. But Rethus was not finished. While the space battle raged, Vidari dropships punched through the atmosphere and began landing troops near the capital city of New Incheon. Thousands of Vidari soldiers, tall and armored and confident, marching toward a colony they expected to find cowering. They did not find cowering. They found Cho Tae-sung. The weapons officer had gone down to the surface with a battalion of Marines 12 hours before the battle began. In those 12 hours, he had turned the capital city into a death trap. Apartment buildings became sniper positions. Parks became ambush zones. Subway tunnels became hidden supply routes connecting every defensive position in the city. He had armed every civilian who could hold a weapon and taught them 3 things: where to hide, where to aim, and when to shoot. The Vidari ground troops entered the city expecting surrender. What they got was the worst urban warfare any species in galactic history had ever experienced. They came around corners and found explosives. They entered buildings and found crossfire. They advanced down streets and found barricades made of cars, furniture, and steel plates that Juno had welded together from the colony's construction supplies. Every block was a fight. Every intersection was a kill zone. Every shadow could hold a human with a weapon and the will to use it. The Vidari soldiers were brave. Nobody could say they were not. But they had been trained for a different kind of war, a clean war, where enemies stood in the open and fought with honor. They had never been trained for this, for the screaming, the smoke, the explosions shaking the ground, the constant feeling that death was waiting behind every wall. Within hours, something broke inside them. Not their bodies, their minds. Shin Miso saw it firsthand. She had set up field hospitals in the basements beneath the city, and she treated everyone who was brought to her, human and Vidari alike. The human wounded were bloody and broken, but burning with a fierce energy that kept them conscious and fighting even when they should have been unconscious. The Vidari wounded were different. Many of them had simply stopped moving. They sat on the ground, staring at nothing, their bodies locked in the freeze response that millions of years of prey animal evolution had built into their nervous systems. Miso treated them with the same care she gave her own people. She set broken limbs, stopped bleeding, and spoke softly to soldiers who could not understand her words, but could understand the kindness in her voice. She wrote in her medical log that night, by the light of a flickering lamp, in a basement that smelled like blood and dust. She wrote that the difference between humans and the Vidari was not strength or intelligence. It was what happened when everything went wrong. Humans got angry. Vidari shut down. Above the city, Commander Rethus made his decision. The ground assault was failing. His soldiers were dying or breaking. His fleet was bleeding. He could not win this battle on the surface, so he would win it from orbit. He ordered his remaining ships to begin orbital bombardment of the capital city. His own officers hesitated. There were Vidari troops down there, mixed in with the humans, fighting in the streets. Bombardment would kill them too. Rethus did not care. He gave the order again. Before the first bombardment round could fire, Captain Kang Do-hyun did something insane. He ordered the remaining human ships to charge directly at the Vidari flagship. Not a flanking maneuver, not a tactical approach. A straight, screaming, full-speed charge at the heart of the enemy fleet. It was suicide. Every tactical manual in the galaxy said so. No sane commander would fly a smaller ship directly into the guns of a larger fleet. They had never encountered a species willing to use their own ships as battering rams, willing to crash their vessels into the enemy if it meant taking one more of them down. The psychological shock was instantaneous. The Vidari formation shattered. Ships broke ranks, scrambled to avoid the incoming human vessels, collided with each other in the confusion. The bombardment order was forgotten. The carefully maintained lines dissolved into panic. Rethus screamed orders that no one followed. His fleet, or what was left of it, barely 90 ships out of the original 200, turned and ran. They jumped to faster-than-light speed and fled the system like animals running from fire. New Inshan was scarred. Parts of the capital were burning. The air smelled like smoke and metal, and things that Miso did not want to think about. But the colony was standing. 6 million people were alive, because 40 ships and a city full of ordinary people had refused to kneel. On the Iron Wake, which was barely holding together, with hull breaches on 3 decks and half the crew in bandages, Do-Yoon stood on the bridge and looked down at the planet below. He said nothing for a long time. Hana stood beside him, as she always did. Her console was cracked, and there was blood on her sleeve that was not hers. She looked tired. She looked proud. Far away on the Conclave homeworld, Lyrian sat alone in her quarters and watched the battle report. She saw the numbers. She saw the footage. She saw Commander Rethis order bombardment on a city where his own soldiers were fighting, and she made a decision. She opened a private encrypted channel to a Vidari journalist, one who still believed in truth, and she sent everything. The full, unedited recordings of the battle, the bombardment order, the executions that started it all. Everything. Within 24 hours, every civilization in the galaxy saw what the Vidari Conclave had done, and what the humans had done in return. The galaxy watched a species of 6 billion people stand against an alliance of trillions and win. And for the first time, the galaxy felt something that it had never felt before when it looked at humans. Fear. The leaked footage did exactly what Lyrian hoped it would do. It cracked the Conclave like a hammer hitting glass. 3 minor civilizations pulled their fleets from the Joint Command within the first week. They were small species, quiet ones, who had joined the Conclave for protection and trade, not for a war against a species that fought like cornered animals. 2 more followed by the end of the month. Their ambassadors gave polite speeches about neutrality, but everyone knew the truth. They were afraid, not of the Conclave, of the humans. High Speaker Olen responded the only way he knew how. He doubled down. He stood before the council and declared humanity an existential threat to galactic civilization. He called for full military mobilization. Every remaining member species was ordered to contribute ships, soldiers, and resources. The Conclave assembled a war fleet of over 2,000 warships, the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity had 300. Any other species would have looked at those numbers and surrendered. Any other species would have sent diplomats, offered concessions, done whatever was needed to survive. But humans were not any other species, and Kang Do-Hyun, now promoted to fleet commander after New Incheon, had no interest in survival through surrender. He had something better in mind. Do-Hyun gathered his senior commanders on a station orbiting Earth. Yoon Hana stood beside him, as always, with a display screen showing the full map of Conclave space. She had been studying their logistics for weeks, mapping every supply route, every fuel depot, every communication relay, every shipyard. The Conclave was massive, but massive things have long supply lines, and long supply lines have weak points. "We are not going to defend," Do-Hyun told his commanders. "We are going to attack." The plan was Hana's. She called it the Deep Hunt, and it was modeled on submarine warfare from Earth's ancient history, a time when small, hidden vessels had brought powerful navies to their knees by attacking not the warships, but the supply ships behind them. She divided the human fleet into wolf packs, small groups of 5 to 10 ships each, fast, aggressive, and independent. Each pack was given a sector of Conclave space and a simple set of instructions. Find supply lines, destroy them. Find fuel depots, destroy them. Find communication relays, destroy them. Do not hold territory, do not fight fair, do not stop. The wolf packs launched within the week, scattering across Conclave space like sparks from a fire. Bake Juno gave them one more gift before they left. He had been working without sleep again, which worried Miso but surprised no one. He had developed a new weapon using modified faster-than-light drives. A drive could be ejected from a ship and detonated, creating a rupture in space-time that destroyed everything within 500 kilometers. It was crude, terrifying, and brilliant. The crew called it the handshake, because as Juno explained, with the casual tone of a man describing a sandwich, you only use it when you are close enough to shake hands with the enemy. The wolf packs hit the conclave like a storm. In the first month, they destroyed 6 supply stations. Convoys carrying fuel and ammunition to the conclave war fleet simply vanished, torn apart by human ships that appeared from nowhere, struck with everything they had, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. The Vidari had never fought a war like this. Their military doctrine was built for set-piece battles, fleet against fleet, with clear winners and losers. They had no doctrine for an enemy that refused to stand and fight, that hit them in 100 places at once, that treated the entire galaxy as a hunting ground. By the second month, 11 supply stations were gone. 4 shipyards were crippled. Conclave fuel reserves dropped by 30%. Their massive war fleet, still the largest in the galaxy, began to slow down. Ships ran low on fuel. Weapons ran low on ammunition. Repairs could not be completed because the parts were sitting in the wreckage of a destroyed supply convoy somewhere in deep space. Cho Tae-sung led the most famous raid of the war. He took 200 Marines to a conclave military base on a contested moon. The base held 2,000 Vidari soldiers. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the base belonged to Tae-sung. A conclave intelligence officer, captured in the fighting, asked him how 200 humans had beaten 2,000 Vidari. Tae-sung looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "You trained for war. We trained for hell." The officer did not ask any more questions. Shin Miso, meanwhile, was fighting a different kind of battle. She had continued her biological research throughout the war, and she published a paper that spread across the galaxy like wildfire. It was a comparative study of human and Vidari stress responses, written in simple language that any species could understand. She detailed how human adrenaline worked, how fear and pain made humans faster and stronger and harder to stop. She explained that humans were persistence predators, a species that evolved not to be the fastest or the strongest, but to never stop chasing, never stop fighting, never stop getting back up. The paper was translated into 40 languages, and it terrified them, because it explained something they had felt but could not name. It explained why humans kept winning battles they should have lost. It explained why human soldiers kept fighting after injuries that would have killed a Vidari twice over. It explained why the most powerful alliance in the galaxy was losing a war to a species with 14 planets. Fear makes them more dangerous. The sentence became famous across the galaxy. It appeared on news broadcasts, in political debates, in the nightmares of Vidari commanders who could not understand why their enemies simply would not die. On the conclave homeworld, Lyrian had been removed from her position. She was no longer a cultural observer. She was no longer welcome in the halls of power. But she had become something more dangerous than an official. She had become a voice. She broadcast her warnings from a small apartment, using encrypted channels that the conclave could not shut down fast enough. She said the same thing she had always said. This war is unwinnable. Make peace while you still can. She reached out to Do-hyun through a back channel, a secret communication line that passed through 3 neutral species before it reached the Iron Wake. She offered intelligence on conclave fleet movements, patrol schedules, and defensive positions. In exchange, she asked for one promise. "When this is over," she said, "promise me you will not do to us what we tried to do to you." Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. He thought about the 3 crew members of the Bright Sun. He thought about New Incheon burning. He thought about every person he had lost in 5 months of war. Then he spoke. "We are not like you," he said. "We do not destroy species. We just make sure they never forget What happens when they try to destroy us? Lyrian accepted that answer. It was, she thought, the most human thing she had ever heard. Mercy and a warning, wrapped in the same sentence. The war was 5 months old. Humanity had lost 60 ships. The Conclave had lost 400. 3 more member species had withdrawn. The greatest military alliance in galactic history was bleeding from 1,000 small wounds, each one made by a species they had called vermin. High Speaker Olen sat in his chambers and read the latest reports. Supply lines cut, shipyards burning, allies leaving, an enemy that refused to die, refused to tire, refused to be reasonable. He stared at the numbers for a long time, and something moved behind his ancient eyes. Something his species was never built to feel. Something that had no name in the Vidari language. Humans had a word for it. They called it dread. Olen felt it settling into his bones like cold water, and for the first time in his long life, he understood what Lyrian had tried to tell him. He had not started a war, and the thing that came out was not going back in. Lyrian's final intelligence package arrived on Dohyun's console at midnight. He read it alone in his quarters, with the lights low and the hum of the Iron Wake's engines filling the silence like a heartbeat. The package contained the location of the Conclave's central command station, a massive orbital platform above the Vidari homeworld. It was the brain of the entire alliance, the place where every order was given, every fleet was coordinated, every decision was made. If it fell, the war was over. He sat with the information for a long time. Then he called his crew. They gathered in the briefing room, the same 5 people who had been together since the night the Bright Sun's crew was murdered. Hana, sharp-eyed and already calculating. Juno, with engine grease on his hands that never seemed to wash off. Miso, calm and steady, with her medical kit never more than an arm's length away. Taesung, sitting in his corner, watching, waiting, ready. Do-hyun told them the truth. The human fleet had 190 ships left. Many of them were damaged. Some of them were held together by Juno's repairs, by welding wire and stubbornness and prayers to machines that should have died months ago. The Conclave's home fleet had 800 warships, and they were defending their capital, which meant they would fight harder than they had ever fought before. Nobody in the room suggested retreat. Nobody even considered it. Hana presented the battle plan. She had been working on it for weeks, refining it, stripping away everything that was not essential, until only the core remained. It was not a complicated plan. Complicated plans fell apart in war. It was a simple plan built on the one advantage humans had always possessed. They were willing to do things that no other species would consider sane. The human fleet would attack from 6 directions at once. Not in formation, not in waves, in chaos. Every wolf pack would choose its own targets, its own approach, its own timing. The Vidari would try to hold their lines, because that was all they knew how to do. And while their lines held in one place, they would break in 5 others. It was reckless. It depended on speed, aggression, and the willingness of every human crew to fly into the worst fight of their lives, knowing that many of them would not fly out again. Hana looked at the room when she finished. She did not ask if they were ready. She knew the answer. The human fleet jumped together. 190 ships, scarred and battered and burning with something that the Vidari had no word for. Something between rage and love. The fury of a species that had been told it did not matter, fighting to prove that it did. The Battle of the Vidari homeworld was the largest naval engagement in galactic history. It was also the shortest. The human wolf packs hit the Conclave fleet like a fist breaking through a window. They did not attack the warships head-on. They attacked the gaps, the seams, the connections between ships where communication lines ran and coordination happened. They cut the Conclave fleet into pieces, isolated each piece, and overwhelmed it before the others could respond. The Vidari fought. To their credit, they fought hard. Their ships were powerful, their crews were trained, and they were defending their home. But they fought the way they had always fought, with formation and discipline and order. And order could not survive what the humans brought. On the Iron Wake, Juno kept the ship alive, through damage that should have killed them 3 times over. A torpedo struck the port side and blew out the secondary power grid. Juno rerouted the entire system through the backup conduits with his bare hands, burning his fingers on live cables, whispering to the ship as he worked. "Not yet," he told it. "Not yet. One more. Give me one more." The ship groaned and shuddered around him, but it held. It always held for him. Hana directed the battle from her console, with a focus so intense that she did not notice the cut on her forehead or the blood running down the side of her face. She moved ships like chess pieces, reading the Vidari responses before they happened, exploiting every hesitation, every gap, every moment of confusion. She was not just winning the battle, she was conducting it, like music, like a symphony of violence that the Vidari could not hear, but could feel in the way their fleet crumbled around them. Do-hyun stood at the center of it all, giving orders in a voice that never wavered. He had started this war as a patrol captain who wanted nothing more than to protect his people. He was ending it as the commander of humanity's entire fleet. And he had not lost the thing that mattered most. He had not lost himself. While the space battle raged, Cho Tae-sung led a boarding party toward the Conclave command station. 50 Marines in a breaching shuttle, punching through the station's docking port with explosive charges and pouring into the corridors like water through a broken dam. The station's security forces met them. Vidari soldiers, tall and armored, standing shoulder to shoulder in the narrow hallways. In open space, with room to maneuver and distance to use, the Vidari might have held. But in corridors, in tight spaces where bodies pressed close and weapons fired at arm's length, humans were something else entirely. They were faster, stronger, more aggressive, and utterly without hesitation. The Vidari soldiers, confronted with a fury they had never experienced at close range, broke within minutes. Tae-sung moved through the station like a shadow with a pulse. He did not waste movement. He did not waste ammunition. He was everything that the galaxy feared about humans, distilled into one man. Efficient, relentless, and absolutely certain of what he was doing and why. He reached the central command chamber. The doors were sealed. He blew them open. High Speaker Olin stood inside, surrounded by 6 guards. The guards were elite soldiers, the best the Conclave had. They took one look at Tae-sung and the Marines behind him, at the blood on their armor and the look in their eyes, and they laid down their weapons. It was not cowardice. It was biology. Every instinct in their prey animal bodies screamed at them that what stood in front of them was something they could not fight and could not survive. Olin did not surrender. He simply stood there, ancient and tall, and utterly lost. He had ruled the galaxy for 60 years. He had bent 1,000 worlds to his will. And now, a small, blood-covered human was standing in his command center, and there was nothing he could do about it. Tae-sung looked at him. "It is over," he said. Outside, Do-hyun opened a broadcast on all frequencies. Every ship in the battle, Vidari and human alike, heard his voice. The fighting slowed, then stopped. Do-hyun spoke. "We are not here to conquer you. We are not here to enslave you. We are here because you killed our people and called us vermin. These are our terms. Full recognition of human sovereignty over our worlds. A formal apology, broadcast to every planet in the Conclave. Reparations for the people of New Incheon. A seat on the Galactic Council, not as a minor species, but as equals." He paused. The silence was absolute. "And one more thing. You will teach your children what happened here. You will teach them why. And you will teach them that the species you called weak, the soft-skinned scavengers, from a little death world on the edge of nowhere, broke the most powerful alliance in the galaxy in 6 months. Not because we are monsters, but because you forgot what monsters look like. Olen accepted. He had no choice. He had nothing left. The war ended that day. 1 year later, the Iron Wake flew the same patrol route where the story had begun. Juno had rebuilt the ship from the frame out, and it hummed with a new strength, as if the war had made it tougher the same way it had made its crew tougher. He was in the engine room, singing to the machines, a habit he would never explain and never stop. Miso was in the medical bay, reading a journal on xenobiology, her feet on the desk, a cup of tea going cold beside her. Taesun was in the weapons bay, cleaning a rifle that was already perfectly clean, because some habits are not about necessity, but about peace of mind. Hana sat in the co-pilot seat on the bridge, reviewing reports with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had won a war, and wanted nothing more than a boring afternoon. Do-hyun sat in the captain's chair. He looked out at the stars. They looked the same as they always had, bright and cold and impossibly far away. But they were different now, because the people who lived among them knew something they had not known before. Far away, on the conclave homeworld, a new alien species made first contact. They were small, cautious, eager to join galactic civilization. Their ambassador met with the conclave council and asked about the different species they would encounter. Eventually, they asked about the ones from the outer arm of the galaxy. The small ones, the young ones. Lyrian answered. She had been named the conclave's ambassador to humanity, a role she had earned by being the only person who had tried to prevent the war. She looked at the new species with eyes that carried the weight of everything she had witnessed, everything she had tried to stop, and everything she had learned. They call themselves humans, she said. They are small. They are soft. They live short lives on a world that tries to kill them every single day, and they are, without question, the single most terrifying species this galaxy has ever produced. She leaned forward.